Hey there and welcome to another PSD-Tuts spoon-fed Photoshop tutorial. I'm Gavin Steele and I'm going to be taking you through Eric's how to quickly create a stylish retro text effect. As always, you can check out the tutorial over at PSD-Tuts spoon-fed Photoshop tutorials. Just head over to the link and this is the final image that we're going to be aiming for in today's tutorial. I'm going to quickly show you where you can get the file from for the font. Okay, it's over at dafont.com and it's the old Sega font, or it's like Sega, and just click back. The link for that is over in the tutorial in case you're going through it and you want to find it. It's just here at the top. Okay, all the steps are there as per usual, and this screencast is literally just going to take you through some of those steps and show you the end result that I got. So I'm going to head over to that right now and quickly show you that. So that's what I came up with, and it's pretty similar and pretty on point with the tutorial. So best thing to do is really just get started. So I'm going to close that down. I'm not going to save. Close that down. And I'm just going to set up my workspace like so. And we're going to create a new document. And we're going to set this to, let's just grab a preset 800 by 600, click on OK, and let's bring that into the middle there. And we're going to open up our background, so double click on your background layer, click on OK, and then we're going to fill that with black. So the first thing we've done is we've added black to our background layer, and we might as well call it background. Okay. Once you've done that, we're going to start putting our text on. So head over to your text. Hopefully if you've installed the font correctly, you should have Sega down there. And there it is. Select Sega, click somewhere top of your document, and for this tutorial I'm just going to type in all in capitals PSD on my first line, and then I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to select the color, change it to white, and I'm going to increase the size of that to 200 pixels. And I'm just going to move it down a little bit like so. Okay, on a new layer, I'm going to create the bottom part, and that's going to say TUTS. Highlight that text. I'm going to reduce that to about 144, and let's see how that looks. Okay, we're just looking for these edges to line up nicely like so. Okay, that looks pretty good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to play around with some of the kerning involved in the lettering. So that's the gaps between the letters. Okay, we kind of want to make it look like these two are connected and the D follows on from the S along the top. So before we do that, we're just going to change the color of our text. So I'm clicking on that layer with the text tool selected, and I'm just going to change it to a nice goldy color. So we're going to go with E5 9710 and click on OK. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that. Command C, click on my other layer, and I'm going to change the color by pasting in that value like so. Okay, so we've got a nice goldish text now, and we're going to play around with our kerning. So we're going to bring up our character box set. Okay, it's right here, and if you go to Window, you can just click on it there if you haven't got it checked, and then it should pop up somewhere on your screen. Okay, so we're going to be playing around with the value between our letters. So I'm going to click with my text tool selected between my P and my S, and I'm going to set this to something like, I'm going to go for -55 for that one. So just hit -50 and move that to 5. Okay, and then I'm going to move it between the S and the D, and I'm going to select something like -40 or 44 Let's try 45. Oh. Okay, I'm just trying to get a bit more of a connection down there. So basically we've just brought those letters on the same level, on the same layer, sorry, together so that they join. Okay, the next thing we need to do is have a look at the PSD, and the tuts part below doesn't quite line up anymore. So I'm just going to move this back over here and I'm going to select that layer, highlight it one more time, and I'm just going to reduce it. And we're doing this by eye. You could pull down your guides. You could pull down our guides and line that up, and that's pretty good. Okay, so that's all our lettering pretty much done. Later on we might play around with bringing the two layers closer together. In fact, I'm just going to do that now. So I'm going to come out of my layer mode, and I'm just going to move by selecting that layer and just nudge it up a little bit, just so there's less of a gap. I don't want it to join like that. I just want it to be slightly bigger gap, something like that. Looks great. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need to style the text. So double click on one of those layers, those text layers that you've created, bring up the layer styles, and we're going to start by adding a gradient. So head over to gradient down at the bottom, make sure you've got the blending mode set to screen. We're going to have it set to 68. We're then going to have it on linear, 120 degrees, and we're going to scale it to about 131. Now the gradient we're going to use, so we're going to come back up to our gradient. Okay. Make sure we can all see that. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go black, white, black, white, black. Okay. So your first color you need to make sure is set to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. We're going to add another color about here, and that's going to be white. So I double click on that little box, drag up to the white, and you can see that's now white. I'm going to add another black. Again, all I did was I clicked in the box area and then double clicked on the little box, the little swatch, and changed it to black. And then we're going to have one more white one, and then this last one we're going to set to be black. Click on OK. Above in the top layer, this top part, we're going to add a black colour as well. So it should be black, 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 and black, and just make sure they line up like so. Okay, click on OK. We're then going to add a bevel. I'm just going to move this down just a little bit. Okay, you can start to see it's starting to have an effect on that tuts part. So the next thing we need to do is in our bevel, we're going to change it to inner bevel on smooth. We're going to set it to a depth of 1000, so just add another 0 there. Make sure your direction's going up. We're going to set the size to 2 pixels. Make sure your soften is set to 0. 120 degrees. We're going to use the global lighting, and we're going to have it set to 30 for the altitude. You can leave everything else alone. Head down to opacity, and we're going to set that to 0. So you should have screen set to 75 and white, and multiply set to black with the opacity set to 0. Okay, the next thing we need to move on to is inner glow. So in inner glow, we're going to have it set to normal in our blending modes, 75 for our opacity, 0 for the noise, and the color we're going to select is black. We're going to make sure you've got it on softer, on edge. We're going to set it to 45 for our choke and 5 for the size, and then we're going to have it set to 50 and 0, which should be the standard settings. And then finally we're going to add our inner shadow, and we're going to set that to multiply, black, 75, an angle of 120 degrees. We're going to set it to 1 for the distance, 0 for the choke, 5 for the size, and everything else should be fine. So let's have a look at how that looks. Click OK. Okay, that's not bad. I'm just going to right click on that layer, and I'm going to go to copy the layer style down at the bottom. Okay, so I'm copying that layer style, I'm going to right click on my PSD layer, and I'm going to paste the layer style, and you can see it applies exactly what I did to the tuts, to the PSD. Okay, next thing we need to do is change the perspective. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to freely transform it, or we're going to transform using the perspective. Before we do that, I'm just going to back up these text layers. Always a good idea to back them up. So I just drag them down to the new layer, and then with the old ones I'm just going to turn the visibility off by clicking on the eye there. Okay, so we've got our two duplicates here, the tuts copy and PSD copy, and we're going to play around with the perspective on these. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to select the copy and we're going to add a new layer. Okay, so I'm going to select the top one, I'm going to add a new layer, and then holding down Shift, I'm going to select the bottom text layer, hold down Shift and select the top layer, and that selects all of those layers, and then going to hold down Command E. Okay, and what that does is it merges those layers together. It's Control E on a PC, I believe, so if you haven't got a Mac, try Control E just to merge those layers. And what that's done is it's merged the layers and kept all of the layer styles that we applied to them, okay, and it's rasterized that image. The next thing we need to do is we need to transform our perspective. So I'm going to hit Command T to bring up our transform, and if you right click inside the area we can select perspective. Okay, and we're going to play around with the left and right points, and we're going to drag the left point down. We're going to hold down Shift as we do it, and we're just going to drag it down like so, and we're going to increase the right hand side like so. Going to bring it down to the middle. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to Command T one more time, and this time I'm going to scale it again, holding down Shift. I'm just going to drag that down a little bit and move it back into the middle, and then hit enter. Okay, so once you've transformed it and you've scaled it down, we're going to duplicate that layer twice. So what we need to do is click on the layer and drag it down to the new layer, and I'm going to do that twice. Okay, so you should have two copies of that layer. We're going to name the top layer front. Ooh, not print. Second layer is going to be called mid, and the bottom layer is going to be called back. Okay, we're going to select the middle layer and we're just going to nudge it to the right. Okay, so make sure you've got your move tool selected over here, or you can press V on the keyboard, and then we're just going to nudge it using the arrow key to the right. I'm going to nudge it 3 times, and then my back layer, I'm going to nudge that maybe 15 times, go back to my middle layer, I'm just going to nudge it a couple more times, and then back layer again, just going to nudge it away until we get a small gap between the front and the middle, and a larger break, from the front to the back. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. I'm just going to nudge the middle one more, that's it, and the back a little bit more, like so. Okay, so once you've nudged them, the next thing we need to do is we're going to set our fill to be 0 on our middle layer. Okay, so select the middle layer. Up here underneath opacity you've got fill, and we're just going to set that to be 0. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to add a layer style to that layer. So double click on the middle layer, click on gradient overlay, make sure it's set to normal 100, and we're going to change the color on the end. In fact, an easy way of doing that is making sure you come over to the third one, which is the second one, foreground to transparent. Okay, and then we're going to change our foreground color to 008A and then FF. Click on OK, and then on OK. You should get something that goes from blue to transparent. Okay, once you've got that, make sure it's set to linear for the style. Your angle, we're going to set to -90, and then we're going to set it to 50% on the scale. Let's just have a look how that looks. Okay, that looks pretty good. I want to try and bring that down just a little bit more. So if I play around with the scale, you can start to see that above the tuts bit, you can see there's some light blue just coming down from the top, and still see a bit of the fade there. Okay, I'm happy with that, so click on OK. Okay, next thing we need to do is just check the nudge. We don't want it to be too far over. So with that layer selected, I'm just going to nudge it back just a little bit more till we get something like that. Okay, that looks good. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we're going to create a new layer above our front layer. We're going to call this new layer our chrome layer. And we're going to apply a gradient to that. Okay, so we're going to hold down Command or Control on a PC, and we're going to select the little box, the little thumbnail for front, and that'll give us a selection of that layer. So we haven't actually selected the layer, we've just created a selection in the shape of that layer. We're still on the layer that we've just created. So with this layer that we've just created, we can now apply our gradient. So what we need to do is head over to our gradient tool. So if you hold down your mouse on the bucket tool there, click on the gradient tool, and then head up to the top, and we're going to select this preset over towards the end called Chrome. Click on OK, and then coming from the top left down to the right, I'm going to have a selection like that. So make sure it just crosses the T somewhere in the middle or towards the left. Once you've done that, we're going to set that layer to soft light. Okay, and we're going to stick all of that into a folder. So all of our text now into a folder or into a group, and we can call that text. Okay, the next thing we need to do is create a new layer. Okay, above all of these. Actually, we're going to create a new layer set, so I'm going to click on the folder, not on the actual new layer, and we're going to call this lens flare. And then inside lens flare, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to fill it, so going back to my bucket with black, I'm going to make sure I press Command D or Control D to deselect that area, and we're just going to fill it with black, and it should cover everything up. We're then going to go to Filter, Render, Lens Flare, and inside Lens Flare we're going to choose the, what should we choose? Let's go with, that looks okay, the 105mm or 100mm prime. Make sure your brightness is set to 100%. Click on OK, and then we're going to position that somewhere to the right, and again we're going to set that to soft light. Okay, all it's going to do is bring up little details on top of our lettering. Okay, I might just move it just to the right, like so, and it's just tiny little details there. When you do move the layer, you're going to see that some of the transparency is going to show through. So we're going to have to cover that up later, otherwise we're going to get frustrated when we flip it and try and create the reflection. So what you have to do once you've created that first lens flare is duplicate it. So again, drag it down to the new layer, and I'm just going to rotate it. So Command T and hold down Shift and just flick it all the way around, like so. So now it's over here in the top left hand corner. So again, just brightens this top area up here, and there's some nice little details popping up, and then I'm going to hit enter. Now again, these are the little transparent areas that I talked about before. Just grab a black brush, and on the layer have a look at where they are. They're usually around the edge, so make sure your brush is big enough. Just going to come down, and then I'm going to go along the bottom. And again, just make sure you get all the way across, and again with this layer here, come right across. Okay, and then make sure you come up the side. So you shouldn't really have any transparent areas inside of your layer. Okay, it can be quite hard to see because the thumbnails are pretty small, but you shouldn't have any transparent layers. Now, you also need to apply a layer mask, and we're going to reveal some of it. So make sure on the top layer you click on the mask button like so, and then with a black brush, if we just click, we're going to lighten up some of these areas over here. Okay, and the same, not too much at the bottom. Okay, that looks pretty good. So make sure you've blacked out all of those transparent parts. In the last attempt of this, I cropped at this point, but we're just going to leave this background in later so that when we add those pink bars, we've got enough room to work with. So we're going to duplicate that layer, and first things first, we're just going to pop these into a new folder, and we'll call it PSD Toots. We're going to duplicate this folder, and we're going to start to create our reflection now. In the duplicated folder, I'm going to turn off the lens flare. Okay, it doesn't really, doesn't really matter in the reflection, so we're not going to see it anyway. I'm going to turn off the PSD Toots layer. So I'll turn them back on just so you can see the difference that it makes between them. Okay, and with that layer selected, hold down Command T, head over to Edit, Transform, and we're going to flip that 180 degrees. I'm going to turn on this layer here. Okay, so with the reflection, what we need to do is we need to merge the layer down again. So I took off the lens flare because you're going to get some issues when you try and rasterify the layer. You're going to start to see the edges of the actual flare. It's going to look quite blurry. So make sure you've got the eye unchecked on your lens flare layer, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer at the top, selecting that layer and the copy of PSD Toots. Hold down Command D or Control E and merge them onto a new layer. Once you've got them onto a new layer, press Command T, and we can start to play around with the perspective and skewing these letters so they start to look like a reflection. So I'm just going to flip these horizontally so that we've got the T underneath the T. I'm going to put the S in place, and then I'm going to right click and we're going to go to Skew, and then we're going to use this left hand side here, and we're just going to skew it up like so. Okay, going to hit enter and then undo. I've just gone a little bit too far there, so Command T, and let's not forget to flip that. Okay, and then go to Skew, and let's leave that. So we just start to bring it down. Just play around like so. Okay, and then Going to play around with the scale. Okay, I'm going to hit enter. Once you've done that, the next thing we need to do is add a new layer, or a new mask, sorry, to that layer, and we're going to use a gradient mask. So head back over to the gradient tool, and we're just going to select the first option, which is foreground to background or black to white, and then holding shift, I'm just going to drag from the bottom up, and we can just start to play around with getting rid of the bottom part so we get a nice fade going from the bottom all the way to the top. Now I'm just going to play around with that gradient. I'm going to bring the black to about halfway. Click on OK, and again just play around with that. Dragging up different levels, looking at how the reflection is going to look. Okay, and then I'm just going to reduce the opacity down to about 25. Let's have a look at 25%. Okay, a little bit more. Let's try 35. Okay, about 50% actually should be alright. Okay, so once you've skewed it and you've played around with that, the next thing that we need to move on to is applying some of the little flares. So I'm just going to go back and have a quick look at the original just to show you that. So we've positioned our text in place. We've got our little reflection down the bottom. We need to work on these little blue lens flares that are coming off to the side. So let's head back in, and we're going to create a new layer, and again we're going to fill that layer with black. Head over to filter, render, lens flare, and this time we're going to select movie. We're going to set the movie prime, so I'm just going to move that back over. So with that selected and brightness set to 100, we should be able to see these thick lines that come off to the side. So I'm going to click on OK, and then we're going to set that layer to be linear dodge. Okay, and I'm just going to scale it down so it's a little bit big. I'm going to pop it over the S down here. Okay, then I'm going to hit enter, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to move that new layer right down between our background layer and our PSD Tuts. I'm going to move it up to somewhere around the top up here so we can hide the lens flare a little bit behind the lettering, and maybe just transform that a little bit. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on the screencast, but you should then have some more little blue streaks of light around the top behind the lettering and this part of the blur in front of the lettering. Okay, next thing to do is to create our line. So we're going to create a new document, file new. We're going to have that set to have a width of 40 pixels and a height of 2. Click on OK. It's going to create a nice small little document. I'm going to zoom right in, hopefully I can show you that. And then with my rectangle selection tool, okay, I'm going to set it to a fixed size of 20 pixels by 2 pixels. This just ensures that when I click on the edge here, I get exactly half. And we're going to fill that half with black. Deselect, go to Edit, define a pattern, and then call it, I don't know, bars. Oh, yeah, BRS, that's fine. Call it bars. You don't need to close it down, you can save it for later. but it's already saved into the preset now, so we can then go to a new layer underneath this layer, and we can go to Fill. In Edit, we can choose Pattern, and then we can decide which pattern we're going to go for, and it's the last one that we created. Click on OK, and there are our bars, but we just need to apply a little bit of styling to these bars. So once you've done that, we're going to head over here. Let's set the fill to be 0. Double click on your layer, and we're going to apply a color overlay. So select color overlay. We're going to choose a nice color, nice pink, DD 04 AD. Click on OK. I'm going to bring that down. Okay, click on OK. Let's increase the fill and decrease our opacity. I'm going to go back into color overlay. I'm not sure why that hasn't come up. There we go. Just decrease the opacity a little bit of that overlay till you get the pink that you're happy with. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to click on OK. And then what we're going to do is we're going to Command T that layer and right click. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and then we're going to skew this layer as well, or not skew, sorry, we're going to change the perspective. So I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see all of the handles at the top and the bottom. Right click, and I'm going to go to perspective. This time I'm going to bring the top right box, holding down shift, I'm going to pull it down so the lettering kind of disappears. Like so. I'm going to hit enter. That looks pretty good. I'm going to click on crop, and I'm just going to crop the image like so. I'm going to move back into 100%. And what you should get with that layer, I'm just going to move it. If we start moving it up, okay, or down, what you'll start to get if you look at this area here is you get a slight optical illusion that these lines actually come down and then they level off and they start to go underneath the toots. And it's quite a nice little technique to get. Okay, and that's basically the tutorial. Make sure you set, the last lens flare that we did at the back. Make sure that you set that final one to not soft light. Make sure you have that set as well to linear dodge. Okay, and that's the end of the tutorial. So it looks something similar to the effect that Arik got on his tutorial. Don't forget to check out our other videos on the site in the video section, and keep checking in with PSD Tuts and Spoon-Fed Photoshop tutorials. I've been Gavin Steele, and I hope you enjoyed that tutorial.